Welcome to Courageous Conversations with Lionheart Coaching Co., where we talk about the hard parts of our journey and the courage it can sometimes take to find our way back to ourselves. I'm your host, Mandy Woodard, and on this episode, my friend Sarah joins us to talk about a lot of different things, but mainly parenting and the hard parts, especially. Honestly, too, it doesn't matter if you have no kids, young kids, or adult kids. You're going to want to listen to this one all the way through because we just talk about so many different things and there's a lot to learn here. All right, let's get started. Hi, friends. Are you ready for this episode? There is a lot packed in here in this hour and a half. And I'm really excited for you to hear this and witness this conversation because, one, we talk about a lot of things that are, in my opinion, not talked about enough. And the second reason I'm excited for you to hear this is because you get to hear from my friend Sarah, who is so incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to parenting and even just life. She just has a really great perspective on things. And I said in the intro, it doesn't matter if you have no kids, young kids, or adult kids, because truly, we just talk about all of the areas. Our lives and what life was like with our parents, what life is like with young kids, how things change as your kids become adults. So I hope you enjoy listening. I won't delay any further. Here is my courageous conversation with Sarah Veitenthal. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mandy.
I'm very excited because do you know you're the first female I've gotten to interview?
No, but that's perfect.
Isn't it? Isn't it? I've had a lot of guys on here so far, and I do want it to be a mix. I don't want just one or the other. So, and you have such a soothing voice. Has anybody told you that?
Yes. They tell me I should read children's books.
You should. You should start a podcast and do that.
I will think about that. You might have to guide me.
Okay. So how are you?
I'm doing good.
What are we going to talk about today?
So, I don't know. I feel like life has pulled me in a totally different direction. But I'm here for it. And I'm just kind of talking through things myself.
Yeah. It's so funny because I asked you that question. It's like, wait a second. Aren't you the host? Aren't you supposed to say? But truthfully, you just answered it because the podcast is all about our healing journey and finding ourselves. And I just know that that's been a journey you've been on for a while now.
Absolutely.
So what are you up to? Let's just start there. What do you have going on right now?
So I have a lot, as always. And it's interesting because in mid-August, I actually walked away from my job of 10 years.
Wow.
And I was super excited because I thought, I'm going to have so much time. I'm going to have time for my kids and myself and really hone in and focus on what's next. But after about a week of my little mini retirement, I was invited to join a wellness center in Steven City. So the woman who owns that center kind of got wind of my what's next plan, and she approached me and said it would be a wonderful opportunity if we could work together. So I agreed, and I kind of stepped into that role, and so now I am offering a space for postpartum women or mothers of any stage and any part of their journey to come with or without their children to really own who they are as a woman and as a mother and as a human and just explore that identity and to really connect with what that means for them and then their story and how they have traveled through motherhood. So I have zero time with my kids and I've been busier than ever, but it's a dream come true.
I know that you're so good at that. You're so good at that's like the perfect thing for you to do.
It's been really fun. I'm just kind of like still trickling into what this looks like. But I've also gotten into a lot of herbalism, and I'm doing a lot of farming as well. So simultaneously, I'm starting a side business that has to do a lot with farming and doing medicinal herbs, because I really want true healing. I want true healing for humans and families and children. And because that's such a passion for me, I feel like it's not a job. This is just my calling, and I don't know where it's taking me quite yet, but I'm starting.
I am so excited for you. I didn't even know that about the farming. I didn't know that's what. So I saw you asked me to like the page, like I got the invite, and I was like, "Whoa, what's this?" But of course, we get distracted. I was probably cooking dinner or something, so I knew, okay, I'm gonna ask her when she comes to do the show with me. So that's awesome, though. So are you like in the super early stages of that, or have you already been growing things for a while?
So this is actually our third year.
Okay.
And I had always had a huge interest in alternative medicine and what that looks like for families, especially children, because my middle daughter had an autoimmune disorder when she was a toddler that was pretty scary. And it kind of turned into a chronic diagnosis as opposed to an acute diagnosis. And all of like sort of the modern pharmaceuticals weren't working for her, and she was actually having reactions to them. And so that's when I saw an herbalist and a medicinal advisor, and she basically said, get all natural cleaners and start eating a cleaner diet, and let's talk about some alternative medicine and herbs. And within a couple of months, Audrey's numbers had completely reverted back to normal.
Wow.
And knock on wood, she has never reverted back into that state of a chronic diagnosis. So as my children grew and I got older, and we just stayed kind of on that path of, more traditional medicine, I just saw us all getting healthier as time went on, and we weren't kind of caught in that pharmaceutical cycle. And I always wanted to invest in cannabis products because I had read a lot about how we have the endocannabinoid system in our body, and if we don't activate it, it dies. And so what that does is it actually calms our stress and anxiety and decompresses us. Well, and we can go into this later, but one of the reasons why I'm also doing what I'm doing is because as a mom, I was always feeling a lot of stress and a lot of tension and taking that out on my kids. But when I started taking CBD oil a couple of years ago, everything went zoop, and I just started calming way down. But a lot of what's on the market is junk and just full of dye and sugar and chemicals. And I really just wanted to get back to the plant itself. So simultaneously, we're also growing a lot of herbs. So we have lavender and rosemary and sage and thyme and lemon balm and oregano, and they've all kind of taken off. So the next step is we just got approved to be an FDA approved kitchen.
Ooh.
So we can begin to make medicine and tinctures. And so my main goal, of course, is going to be women's health. And I'm going to focus on moms. And when we get to that point of being really stressed out or really anxious, we live in the society of, oh, mommy just needs a glass of wine. And you just pour your glass of wine after the kids go to bed. That's not doing us any good. And it's just taking away from us.
I couldn't agree more.
So my goal is to really just provide women with teas and with tinctures and with salves or even aromatherapy or just methods of really pure organic self-care that will simultaneously kind of correlate with what I'm doing with my Women's Wellness Center, to really support our mental and emotional and physical and spiritual health, because we deserve it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just love everything you just said. And I know it's been brewing in you for a while, because what was it, 2 years ago we sat out by the river and you painted this vision, and do you feel like it's matching that? Or is it taken a different turn?
I feel like initially it has matched that original plan, so to speak, because I thought about that plan for so long. and it kind of solidified. So when I started everything, even just a month ago, I started it with that plan in mind. But now already it's taking different turns and it's reshaping a little bit. And some of the women and children that I've already worked with have said, it'd be really great if you hosted a group circle, or if you did something else that, supported us in this way. And I think I'm still so open to things changing and kind of just seeing what fits the needs of today's families.
Yeah.
That I'm open to pretty much anything and kind of allowing others to help me shape my plan.
Yeah. Well, being flowy is all about, that's femininity right there, is flow, going with the flow and allowing it to shift and change a little bit. And I think that's beautiful. It's going to become something so much bigger than you probably could imagine.
I hope so.
I feel like that's what's happening with me too right now, because I didn't know what all I was going to do. I thought maybe I would just see people one-on-one, but then I saw the benefit in the circles and being able to do things in that group space. It's very healing when you can get women together and hold space for each other. So I want to ask you, whatever truly planted the seed. So you were stressed out when your kids were young. Is that, like, when did you actually realize this was a huge need and you needed to act on it?
Probably not until a couple of years ago, because I think like my own story did bring me to where I am now. But I was so in the eye of the storm. Like I was so like in the thick of it, and everything was just spinning wildly and like chaotically around me. I knew that I needed someone to like throw me that life saver device and pull me out of there, but I didn't know where to look or what that even meant. So I just kept going and going and going and going. And then a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to start a parent education group and a mommy and me group at the school where I was employed. And then I started talking to other parents and I started talking to other families, and I realized how many people were going through that. So then, because I wasn't so isolated and I started connecting to these other humans, I could reflect on my early years and be like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Like I was not in a good place. And I know that so many other people feel that way, but we're so disconnected from that idea because as moms, we have to uphold like certain images. We have to uphold certain expectations even today. And it's become even more challenging because now we're expected to not only, get the dinner done. All the kids are supposed to be in extracurricular activities. The house is supposed to be, Pinterest type house. But not only that is, we're supposed to be mom bosses. This whole idea of mom boss has arisen. And more moms are stepping out of the home and have to help financially as well. We're torn in so many different pieces. It's completely exacerbated our postpartum depressions. It's we're all having like identity crisis. We feel very depleted all the time. And so if you throw on any other stressors onto that kind of already challenging foundation, you can just feel completely defeated. And I know that that's where I was, because I felt I was very young and I had hardly any of my other friends had kids. I was away from my family, and I had 3 kids in 3 years.
Yeah.
So my body was just like all over the place, and my mind was too. And like reflecting now back to when my kids were babies and toddlers, I just feel sad for that mom, because I'm like, I want to give you a hug. Like I want to go back and just like, I still don't really know what that mom needs. Like I don't know even what many of my clients need per se. I just know that they need to feel safe and understood, and that they have support. I think that's the biggest thing, because I didn't feel like I really felt understood or that I had support, because everybody fawns over the baby or the children, and you're not pregnant anymore, so the attention has gone off of you. And you're feeling very isolated. Your hormones are all over the place. You're not sleeping. And I was having these feelings of like, I don't really enjoy this. This isn't really fun. This isn't what people told me was going to happen. And then I just felt guilty. I felt guilty for having those feelings. So I shoved them way, way, way down, pretended like they didn't exist. And and just moved forward, one foot in front of the other every day, almost on autopilot. And that's what I'm seeing most moms on, is autopilot. And we have the opportunity. It's there. It's right there to grab and to hold on to really enjoy life and our kids. We just have to like move out of that eye of the storm and stand from the outside of it and just be like, oh yeah, there's a storm. It's happening. Okay. Yeah. I'm on the beach still. You guys have fun in the storm or whatever's happening.
I can relate to that so much because I probably would look back at my younger mom self and feel very sad for her too.
Yeah.
I had Tristan. I turned 19 when he was born, and no, none of my friends had kids yet. And we lived in my mom's basement with no windows. So I wasn't getting the sunlight during the day. It was just straight darkness. And I've never been good at laundry. And all of a sudden I have all this laundry to do and these responsibilities. And I definitely went to a darker place. Not just with him, but a little bit with Liam, my second son, and then a lot of it with Scarlett. And we even had it all quote unquote together. We had a home and everything was just right, whatever right is. And I still slipped way down into that. And it's 100% likely because I didn't have the support. And it wasn't that my husband wasn't supportive or, even my mom helped me clean my house and things. But what is it? What happens that we don't feel that support? Is it the lack of mom friends? Is it this shift, this change with the baby? What is, I'm not asking you, what's the cause of postpartum depression? Not solve the world's issue now, but what do you think it is?
Well, I think there's a lot that goes into it, and it's obviously different for each person. The first thing I want to say about being pregnant with girls, and this is biological, is that their estrogen production starts in the womb. So we're all on a spectrum of hormones, boys and girls, based on our biological DNA. So women have a spectrum of estrogen. Some of us have very high estrogen. Some of us have very low estrogen. And so do our daughters. So sometimes when we're pregnant with little girls, if we have very high estrogen as a woman and then our daughter starts producing estrogen, too much of that is what kind of swings us into that postpartum depression phase when the baby comes out, because it's a huge drop in that estrogen. Something else that I have recently picked up on, so I'm almost done with my postpartum doula certificate. So I've been in a wonderful program for the past couple of months and it's been super informative. But one phrase that's kind of new-ish on the psychological field is called matrescence. And this is something that one article was written about in the 70s. And now female psychologists are really starting to dig deep into what that means. The reason why matrescence sounds so much like adolescence is because it is a huge time of chemical change in our brain, and it refers to the woman's brain after giving birth.
Oh, interesting.
So we are, as that teen is going through their formative years of really like figuring out who they are and solidifying their identity and their personality, the new mother goes through that again. And we are not told that.
No.
Nobody is told that. Nobody knows this. And it's so new on the science field that there isn't really even a lot of research or information yet. But the momentum is picking up and people are like, there is something to this. Because we know about mom brain.
Right.
We know that our brain goes through biological changes to meet the needs of our baby and to care for them. But if we have more awareness and understanding that we're going through another huge identity crisis at that time, we might be able to kind of look at that. We might be able to look at ourselves a little bit more gently.
Yeah.
And say, oh my goodness, like this is huge and I need to be a little bit more gentle on myself. And we need to be a little bit more gentle as a society to moms and not be have so many expectations placed on them. I mean, we don't have the health care needed to, for a lot of women to take really important and long maternal breaks and bond with their baby. I mean, in most places, it's 6 weeks.
Yeah, which
6
is,
weeks.
oh my God, there's no way. I mean, my situation was different because I had my own business, so I could take longer. And it's funny, I asked you that question, and then immediately I thought, Mandy, you know what was wrong with you. It was an identity crisis. And then you just sat there and explained all of that. It was an identity crisis coupled with unhealed trauma. Mm-hmm. And it just rose to the surface. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was either I was being explosive or I was super depressed and just numbed out.
Yep, that's exactly where I was too. And the more we share our stories, the more we realize a lot of women are going through that. New moms are going through that. But they feel so ashamed. And most of them are already dealing with those unmet needs or past traumas. And you couple that with all of the gigantic hormonal changes we're going through. And we don't even identify this as one of the life crises. But it absolutely should be. Because if we did, then I think society would probably handle it differently. And I could imagine having a 6-week-old and bringing it to a daycare and then just going back to work. Your body isn't even healed at that point. Your mind is still going through all of these different shifts. And so they're doing different studies right now. And the most solid information for the most long-term study is that postpartum depression can last 4 years.
I was just about to ask you, how long could it last?
A solid 4 years. But there are some new studies that are following women a little bit longer, and some reports are showing up to 7 and 8 years.
Okay.
After birth.
Wow.
And I think that's very true because I reflect. So my youngest is 10, and I feel like I resurfaced just probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
When he was 7. And I think it was because I had kid on top of kid on top of kid. Like my body and my brain was really just like, oh my gosh,
give us a break.
I really just shut down. So I like when I see myself kind of resurfacing, just 3 years ago, and then knowing what I know now, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I was really suffering in this chaotic space for almost 10 years because Emma was 10 3 years ago. So to be considered an expert at something, like by definition, you have to work in the same profession for 10 years.
Okay.
Yet mothers are expected to be natural mothers and to be good at laundry or to be good at cleaning and cooking and taking care of the baby instantaneously. So I think about that 10-year mark when I first started feeling like I'm really actually enjoying my kids and I'm really kind of getting good at this. I had just hit that point of being an expert. Everything before that was just like, trial and error. And I mean, it still is, but I still don't really know what I'm doing because we're in a different phase now. But like resurfacing and kind of feeling like myself again was because I felt like I was kind of knowing what I was doing with my parenting job. Right. And that's what it is sometimes. I mean, we have to be a business manager or a chauffeur or a tutor or all of these different things. And so with my parenting job, I felt very underwater until I kind of became that decade-long expert. But I also feel like a lot of those lingering, like postpartum emotions and hormones were starting to fade too. So it was like a simultaneous thing.
Yeah, that makes sense for me too, though, because Tristan is 15. And I would say, well, I didn't feel like an expert when he was 10 because we had stuff we were working through with him. Mm-hmm. But definitely over the last 3 years, I feel like, you know what, I could coach parents with things for sure. And it's not just, because I also am a life coach and was doing that work, but all the work that I was doing to learn for them and the things we were going through. And I don't know, the timeline, the 4 years feels very true for me because my middle son was 4 and it was like, he turned 4 in December and I got pregnant with my daughter at the end of January. But it was like those first few weeks of January, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel great. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, I got pregnant. So it was like I had only got to experience that and I had never because I had him and his brother closer together. So I was like, wow, what is this? And now here we are. My youngest is about to be 7. And yeah, it's just like the last year. It's felt like we're coming up above the water. Like we've been drowning and now we're coming up above the water.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. So I do have a really good question for you. With all of that being said and us becoming our experts and really learning what it means to be a parent those first 10 years, something I think about on a regular basis is, and I don't want to use the word damage, but a lot of times I know that we as parents create beliefs for our children, and some of them are unhelpful. And I talk to parents about this all the time, and I have my advice for it. You know, well, you're going to make mistakes, go back and clean it up. That's all you can do. But do you worry or think about what could be, and is damage like the absolute worst word to use? Like what's happening with our kids? How are they internalizing what we are going through and our responses to them?
So none of us are exempt from trauma. Every human that is placed on this earth will experience some form of trauma. I don't know if it's part of our existence, if it's part of our evolution, but nobody is exempt. Everybody has some form. And I don't think damage is too harsh, because I think that sometimes as the parent, we need to use some of those harder words to be able to face that we have inflicted damage and trauma on our own children. And no parent is exempt from that. And that's going to look different for each family. I mean, there are some families who, live a very healthy life and waited until they really were ready and prepared for children and read all the books and know about children's development and how to interact with their children. But there's still going to be an aspect that maybe falls short, or maybe they're overcompensating with because they themselves are a child or a product of something traumatic that has happened in their life. So this is a worry that I get a lot from other parents that I work with as well, but also a personal worry, just because I know, in addition to sort of my own personal mindset on parenting and mothering and where I was myself, I was also not in a great marriage at the time. And my kids absolutely were exposed to that and subjected to that. And so that's my biggest worry. Not so much like me, because I feel like even though I was, making tons of mistakes then and doing things that I absolutely 100% regret, my biggest regret is what they were exposed to as far as arguments and stuff. And I want them to be able to have healthy relationships when they grow up. So when I think about these things, and when other parents come to me and think about these things, the biggest thing that I have learned, and honestly it's the most helpful, and I'm going through it right now, and it's huge, is that between the ages of 12 and 15, it mimics the 0 to 3 brain. Oh. So there is a huge opportunity for you as a parent to kind of mirror what they were like as an infant and a toddler, but you're in a better place. Think about their eating and their sleeping and their growing and what that young adolescent is going through. Socially, their language is exploding. They're just like the 0 to 3 child is creating their little personality and identity to be a human and to be a child. That 12 to 15 early adolescent is doing the same thing, but to be an adult.
Wow.
So we have an opportunity as parents to really guide our children to kind of unlearn a lot of that negativity that we may have exposed them as younger children, and to prepare them to be successful adults. And so one thing that I'm doing with my kids now is talking to them about that, being open and honest and letting them know what's going on in their brain and their bodies, apologizing for some of the things that I went through. Sometimes they still come to me with tears and say, I remember an argument that you and Dad got into, and I'm feeling really sad about that. And I'm like, yeah, that sucked. I'm really sorry for putting you through that. But you know what? We're in a better place now. And, Dad and I are friends, and you're in a better place. And as a family, we're going to continue to grow. But I'm also taking the opportunity to tell them I'm not perfect. I am a human. I know I'm your mom, and I'm supposed to know and do the right thing, but I don't always know. And I don't always do the right thing, even if I do know. So really, I'm just taking this so my kids are 10, 12, and 14 right now. Yeah. So my oldest two were right smack dab in the middle of that very vulnerable time period again. And fortunately, I learned this information right when my oldest turned 12. And I was like, yes, there's still time.
I know you're telling me this. And
Yes.
Tristan's 15. I'm like, okay, what have I
Yes.
done
No.
in the last 3 years? And I have
You
done
just
exactly
said, yeah.
that, though. I have apologized a lot and told him that I regret the way I disciplined him. Because I very much... So I watched Nanny 911. And I thought that that was how you were supposed to parent. And I knew no different. I mean, I'm 19. There was no other little kids around. And I do wish that I knew then a little bit more. I don't like to regret things. And I know that his path is his path. But he sees the way I parent his sister now. And so that's what's prompted it to come up a lot. Like, why are you not doing to her or treating her the way you treated me? And I have to own it and say, buddy, I just didn't know. I didn't know how that was impacting you until you got older. And I don't want to repeat those same mistakes. And I think he understands it. I hope he does. I hope that especially when he becomes an adult. I mean, he hears how different I speak to him now compared to even 2 years ago. It's night and day, the conversations we have, and I'm a lot less explosive, and so is like the household in general is a lot less explosive than it used to be. But it's like you get put in that pressure cooker or your brain goes into survival mode. So I like to tell people, give yourself some grace. When you're in survival mode and you're reacting, you don't realize that that's what's happening. It took a life coach telling me that I was stuck in survival mode for me to realize I was in survival mode. And I guess that was about 3.5 years ago now. And I was like, light bulb, holy crap. And how do we ever get there in the first place? Is because yelling and screaming and fighting all the time. And that's what I was subjected to that as a child. And then I repeated that with my young boys more than my daughter. So it's like, we know better and we do better. And that's all I can say. So I hope over the last 3 years I've helped shape him.
Well, I think it's really interesting because you said just kind of naturally, like resurface and coming up and like feeling more like yourself and shifting into a new identity as a mom kind of occurred organically 3 years ago. That's when he was 12.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and that actually, we had some major changes over the last, so it's 2022. And in 2019, we did in the fall of 2019 is when we had a really abrupt shift. I really took control and I wasn't listening to my intuition as a mom. And I sensed that there was a need, but because of society, which was homeschool, but because of society, I didn't feel safe, I guess is the word, to act on that and be confident enough in myself. But in November of 2019, I said, that's it. I'm going back into what I know as a mom. I'm listening to my intuition, and I pulled him from public school. And so, yeah, you're right. It was 3 years ago. 3 years ago now. So he was 12 at the time because he'll be 16. Yeah. So he got to see what happens when you listen to your intuition. And that's something I constantly am talking to my kids about too, is listening to their intuition. So I would love to hear a little bit more though, if you want to speak on it, about the hard, when you were in the hard. Is there, could you share for someone who may be in that hard space right now? I mean, you went through a divorce, and I don't know how long of a process that was for you, but maybe let's put it this way. You can share a little bit about your experience if you'd like, but also what could you tell a parent that may be in that situation right now and they feel like this is going to ruin my kids, or I don't know what to do, and they're falling into that depressed, guilty, shameful state. What could you say to them?
So one of the things, like with reflecting on sort of that hard and that story, when I actually got to the point of getting a divorce, that was kind of like the end of the hard. So I think that our relationship contributed a lot to that hard time. So the kids were little. They were like 2, 4, and 5 when we separated. And it was everything before that period that was really sort of the toxic time period and the hard. And once we decided to separate, that was another huge weight. Just because we're meant to be friends. We're meant to be co-parents, and we're meant to be friends. And like, that's where we are now. And ever kind of since that moment, it's been pretty good. But before that time period, I think the hard was really just having the kids back to back. So any parent who had, I mean, parents have their version of hard if they have one kid or 10 kids. If
Right.
they have their kids 5 years apart or 1 year apart, there's a version of their hard. But for me, it was the demands. It was somebody constantly needing me. And I read a really interesting article just a couple days ago about, again, shifting into being a mom and it almost being expected to be instantaneous. And they talk about how wonderful it's going to be and how you're going to bond instantly with your child, and there's no love like there's ever been between mother and child. Well, I feel like with my first, I gave birth and they put this wiggling, gray, squirmy alien thing on my chest and they were like, here you go. Do you want to nurse her? And I was like, what? I don't know how to do that. What are you talking about? And that was the beginning of the hard. Just
Wow.
no support from the nurses or the doctors or family. Everybody was like, you're a mom now. You know what you're doing. And I didn't feel that instant bond. And so I felt so guilty. Like, I don't even know this human being who's on my stomach. Why am I supposed to love them? How am I supposed to love them? I don't know them. And I felt so guilty about that because everybody's like, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it beautiful? And I was like, I don't know. So with that was the beginning of the hard because I pretty much from day one just felt guilty for not having that instant, like, oh, I'm so in love. Of course I loved her, but it took months for me to get to know her. It took months for me to really feel like a mom and to feel like I loved her on a really deep level. And because I felt so guilty and so different than everybody else, it just kind of pushed me more into that isolated closet of like, oh, well, aren't you different? You're not, that typical mom. And then there were all of these expectations, again, of like what I should be doing and how I should be feeling. And there was something else interesting that I read not too long ago. It was a group of women in high school and college that were single and didn't have children. And they were asked the question, like, what do you want to do with your life? Like, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself? Every single participant in the study said what they wanted to do after school, what college they wanted to go to, what job they wanted, where they wanted to travel. Not one woman said they wanted to have kids and be a mom. It's because that's almost like expected at some point in our life that that's going to happen. But if we get pregnant and have children before we get to do all of our life dreams and goals and plans, there's going to be resentment. And I think that was like the root of my heart, is that I had a little bit of resentment towards my kids. And I had resentment towards my husband because he got to move towards his goals. He was not held back whatsoever. I was in the process of applying for grad school when I found out that I was pregnant. And because I had to stop and put myself and all of my dreams and goals and I felt like my entire life on hold, I had this little seed of resentment that was planted. So I was really tense. And it was like everything that kind of happened, whether it be a sleepless night or the car broke down, or maybe we didn't have enough money in the bank account that month, it was so much harder. And so it like fed that resentment dragon. And it was so toxic because we were all wound so tightly that any little thing that was thrown into that stress ball would cause that pressure cooker to explode, like you were explaining, because we couldn't handle it. We weren't prepared to handle these life stressors because we were feeding the wrong aspect of life. And that's pretty much all it was. It was 5 years of that, of just meeting every challenge and meeting every stressor with, why me? And I took it so personally, like the universe was against me and everything was so hard all the time. The same things are happening now. I mean, I told you, like my car was blowing out black smoke before I even came here, and I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna have to borrow a car. And I was able to handle it so differently. Where, 7 years ago, I would have been crying and frantic and having an anxiety attack and just so stressed and probably yelled and screamed at the kids because I was so stressed. But I realized not to take things so personally. Like, the universe isn't out to get me.
Yeah.
And I am able to handle things a lot better because I actually talk a lot about the inner voice. We all have an inner voice, the inner chatter, and it's ourself. And it's conditioned from when we were children. And it's how we deal with a lot of our stressors and anxieties. You kind of have to train that inner voice. So that's kind of like the route I would take when I'm talking to parents who are in that hard, is to literally, and it's a process. It takes time. It could take 10 years. Start retraining that inner voice instead of being like, like growling and mad and screaming and yelling, and allowing that inner voice to like be so hard on ourselves. It's almost like we have to, our conscious has to like teach the inner voice to be kinder and more gentle and to chill out. So now, like, I still self-check. Like, if I'm feeling anxious and my inner voice is like, we have all these things to do and you're getting stressed out and like I am not managing it well, then like it's almost like the angel and the devil on each shoulders. Like, one of them will say to the other one, like, okay, calm down, you can handle this. But it's becoming more natural, so that once you start training that inner voice to speak a little bit kinder to yourself, you start just subconsciously doing it. And now I can handle stress a lot better. But stress is, I would say, probably 99% of the reason why families are feeling so disorganized or so chaotic or not feeling that peace that they want in their home. It's because of stress. So pinpoint those stressors and then take little tiny steps to kind of work to eliminating, and your inner voice has to help with that.
I love that you said it takes 10 years. It could take 10 years because so many people think, oh my God, how am I not through this already? And I'm guilty of that thought too. But it's definitely been like I had panic attacks a lot throughout my life, but I never had one that sent me to the hospital until 2012. And that was like my extreme emotional event that jolted me to realize that I needed to get some sort of guidance or help. And so, yeah, it's been a 10-year long journey now at this point. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably I shifted pretty well over the last 3 years. I hired a life coach in 2019 and that helped. And then just this year even, I've shifted so much. I was just telling my brother, if somebody hasn't talked to me in like the last 9 months, they have no idea who I am, because it's a total different person and we're constantly changing. Mm-hmm. But it's okay if it takes time. Mm-hmm. You have to just trust that process and surrender to it, because it's longer for some people and sometimes it's really quick. Sometimes it's short. Some people process things and move through them very quickly. But the other thing that I want to say to what you just said was, or ask rather, or maybe we just conversate about it. Take those steps to fix or eliminate stressors, but sometimes those are really hard steps, like a job change or a relationship end or a move that needs to be made. So, I mean, that is where I think people really get stuck because of the fear of what's on the other side of that. Mm-hmm. Job change is something I hear a lot. They are not happy where they are. It's causing a lot of stress, a lot of resentment, because they have to do it for their family, but they don't want to leave it because they don't know what's on the other side. And oh my gosh, we can't be without an income. That's really hard, especially this day and age. Or even a relationship. It's that idea of, I need to stay for the kids. However, I'll tell you this, what I always tend to say to people is, but would you want that for your kids? And then how can you make your decision from there? But that's scary, to go from a family home to co-parenting and 2 different homes. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know. Is there anything that you can add to that?
So it is super scary, and that can definitely add to all of the chaos. It can definitely add to the anxiety, to the panic attacks, to the stress. It can totally feed all of your vices, and you might, reach for that glass of wine more often than not. I mean, all of those things are super scary, and it might not be right for everyone. But all we can really do is keep moving forward. So humans are always on a path of evolution. We're always getting older. We can't stop time. We have to keep going. That's the only thing that's constant is change itself. So even if we're not aware of that and we're super scared to step out of that comfort zone, or we're super scared to leave that job or to leave that marriage or to make a change in your parenting, you're still going to be moving forward. And if you just do like one positive thing a day, or if you say one nice thing to yourself or your kids, like any little goodness that you can add in your day is going to keep you kind of moving forward, which is why it does take time and it is a process. It's not instantaneous, like even working out can be quicker than even the process we're talking about, because we're not always going to see the changes. But if we keep moving forward, which time propels us to do anyways, there's going to be change regardless. There's going to be some sort of catalyst. Something is going to come to a head, or something is going to happen. Something's going to dissolve and something new is going to be created. So keep going. Like, just go along for the ride sometimes. If you cannot physically and mentally make any changes or do any decisions right now because you just physically and mentally can't, then at least like maybe we could try to let go a little bit and just allow time to take us forward, because something eventually is gonna change.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can really think about is what got me through those early years is time itself.
Yeah, and the divine intervention, I say. Because something, you're right, there will be something to trigger the event that makes the change, and it's going to jolt you. Mm-hmm. Or it won't. I don't know. Everybody's so different. I feel like it usually has to be a jolt.
I mean, I don't know of any humans who haven't had like any moment in their life that's like, oh wow, that was really big, because life happens, whether that be, new love, or the death of a loved one, or birth of a new one. There's going to be things in life that we cannot control that are going to happen to us and are going to propel us forward. We're not going backwards. I mean, there's a lot of reflection that needs to happen. Like, parents especially need to reflect on their childhood to realize, like what shaped them as a human today. As adults, we do have the capability of doing that. We can reflect on our entire life, and because all of it is formative. We talk about these formative years, but I mean, in reality, it's all formative. Everything is shaping us and changing us. So any reflection on like what brought us to the point where we are now is going to be a huge tool to have when it comes to parenting your kids. But at the same point in time, it also shows us it's a story, and everything is unraveling and things are happening. Some we can control and some we can't. But the more resistant we are, that's kind of like that tension that I was talking about earlier, the more resistant we are to life and chaos and these events, the harder it's going to be. So really, it's also kind of like, using going down the river in a canoe as a metaphor. We can totally miss like these big boulders that we can see, but sometimes, a storm's going to come along, or we're going to go through rapids, or there's going to be a tree limb that we don't see. And we can't control those things, but the river's going to keep taking us downward. Like, we're going to still go.
Yeah.
So we just have to be aware of that and be super mindful of that.
I got to tell you, I feel like I just had a realization, and maybe I've thought it before, maybe somebody else has thought it before, but it's that not reflecting on childhood and how your parents parented you, I think is a huge key to where we are, where we see society, because there's no time for the pause. Mm-hmm. There's no time to stop and think about what you went through and have that self-awareness, and then notice how maybe you're repeating some negative patterns with your children, or how you're unhealed because your child has hit this age, a specific age, where you maybe had a trauma. And all of a sudden, you're feeling different. You're shifting, you're snappy, and you don't know why. Or things are resurfacing for you. You don't realize it's because your child is now the age that you were during a significant event. So not taking the time to reflect, I feel like, is a huge issue. And so many, I mean, how can we just put that on a billboard somewhere? Like, every parent, stop and reflect.
Can we just rent a billboard?
Yeah, we should totally do that. We should totally do that. And then to that, there are a lot of people, parents, that don't want to reflect and think negatively about their parents. They don't want to say, oh my gosh, they could have done this better, because they love them so much. We love our parents so much. But the truth is we all always can do better. I know my kids are going to grow up and say that. And the fear of being able to say that out loud, like, well, this happened when I was a kid and it didn't make me feel good, but you don't want to hurt your parents' feelings. That fear almost hinders us from moving forward in our parenting journey or in our life journey. Even if you don't have kids at all, you got to kind of reflect on that stuff to see where those beliefs were planted and how you got to where you are. So, I don't know. I'm with the billboard idea. I think we need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, absolutely. Because I feel like I'm in a really good place with both of my parents right now. And, like, I feel like even though there's things that, like, I might be frustrated with them about, I don't even really know if it would be productive to have that conversation with them today. Like, hey, I really didn't like this or whatever, because they're not going to be raising any more kids. And I don't know if it's not going to change anything really. And in their heart of hearts, they probably know too. And their healing and their journey and their story is kind of like theirs to own too. And I've thought a lot about this because I've done like some different meditations and some different self-healing work where I took off, like I was doing kind of a projection of taking off my parents' shoes and putting on mine. Because when we are very young, we are sort of this creation of the environment that our parents create around us. Their ideals, you know, like the food that we eat when we're little, the clothes that they buy us. And it takes a kind of a long time to unlearn a lot of what we learned in those first, 10 years of childhood, because we don't have a lot of choice during those times. So I feel like what I do when I reflect on my childhood and I think about the things that I'm like not overly pleased about, or knowing as a parent now what I would do differently, is I just make peace with it. And I make peace with it for myself because I want to preserve the relationship, the good relationship that we have now. And if I see them repeating one of those actions or doing something like when I was younger, I can address it in today's world. I can address it as an adult, and that's how it can teach them. Because if I were to say, I really didn't like how you handled this when I was 6, it's going to drudge up a lot of negativity. And that's going to be a much deeper conversation. Like that, is something that they were dealing with their own unmet needs. And I don't know if they're going to find healing from that or not. I have no idea. But at the end of the day, I like where we are now. And I'm doing my own work to kind of like do that self-reflection and figure out what I liked and didn't like, so I don't superimpose that on my own children. But I don't know. We do love them, and I want to preserve our relationship now. So I haven't had a ton of difficult conversations with them. Like, this is what I, didn't like how you raised me or what you did. I feel like maybe some might come some days. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, because I feel the same way. Like, there's stuff that happened the way that I was parented that I don't like, but I don't feel like I don't really need an apology. I know they were doing the best they could with what they had. Mm-hmm. I think it's that fear for someone to not even want to reflect on it because they don't want to believe that their parents ever did anything wrong, that I think people could get stuck in, maybe. Mm-hmm. But then I do have people that don't want a relationship with their parents based off of, and I think it needs to be said that that's okay. Mm-hmm. We think we have to maintain relationships with people because they are our parents. But sometimes the damage that's going to take time to heal. And we have to get to a healthy place so that we can communicate with them and not be triggered. And it's okay if you have to take pause there. I have a lot of clients who are in that situation, actually.
Absolutely. I think like whatever scenario plays out, wherever you are, relationship with your kids or with your parents or with other families and friends, it just has to feel good for you. Like it has to feel right. And if something feels off, that's where that self-reflection comes in. So you can kind of pinpoint it. And then again, just keep going, taking those baby steps to amending those relationships. But it has to feel right, like I don't want to feel any of that guilt and that resentment anymore, because I know what that breeds and what kind of spawns from that. So as long as those little seeds of resentment aren't being watered and we're not allowing them to grow anymore, like if you don't want to have a relationship with your parents, or even if you're a parent who has adult children and maybe they're not making the best decisions and you feel guilt about that, wherever you land on your relationship with that family member, it has to feel right. Because if we're watering, the guilt plant or the resentment plant, it's just going to cause tension and chaos in our life and put us back in that hard.
Yeah.
So I think, again, like what you said, regardless of whatever they choose, it just has to be right for them. And you're just continuing to acknowledge that you are consciously evolving and you're consciously moving towards betterment, because we all have the possibility to do that.
Yeah.
It's almost like manifesting. It's almost like setting goals. You have a pinpoint ahead of you and you move towards that. And that's one thing that we can also tell parents who are in the hard at any stage in life. And it can be jotting it down. It could just be thinking about it. Is setting a little goal for yourself of like where you want to be with your kids, or where you want to be with your spouse, or where you want to be with your parents. And be kind and gentle to yourself, because if you keep thinking about that's where you want to be, then time will bring you to that point.
Yeah. And what's right for you is so perfectly said, because there is no right or wrong. It's what's right for you.
Absolutely.
And we have to say that over and over again.
It's so different for each person, because goodness, just like there's like literally billions of stars everywhere, like each human is so individually created. It's hard to have any categories or any labels. We're in like the age and the phase and the stage of labeling all of these, different humans. We can't, because we each have our own unique identity that has been shaped by the time and the place and the epoch that we were born in. And it's really, that's why it's so important to also talk to other people and the interconnectedness and the circles that we can create, because that's how we learn, we're not so alone. We have this interconnectedness, but our personal stories are ours to tell, and we can share little bits that are productive, or we can listen. We can take the opportunity to really listen to other people, because that's productive too.
Yeah. But be in a space where you have support. Yeah. We've talked about parenting young kids and where we find ourselves. We've talked about how our relationship can be impacted with our parents, but you did just briefly hit on it, and I kind of want to dive more into it, is what happens when we parent our kids and where our kids are much older and now we're learning. I always say it's never too late. Do you believe that it's never too late?
Absolutely. I just had that thought like literally the other day, that it is never too late to mend a parenting relationship with your child, because at the end of the day, you were always the parent. You were always going to be older than them. You're always going to have more worldly experience than them. And it is your responsibility to take that initiative. I've even projected into the future when my kids are having kids, and I've thought about like, I'm never going to stop being a parent. And a lot of where, some of my hurt came from is I felt like a lot of people in my parents' generation didn't know what to do with teenagers and didn't know what to do with young adults as far as parenting, because, in our country, 18 is supposed to be an adult still. Well, we now know that the prefrontal cortex is not done developing until 28 at the latest.
Oh, 28.
28.
I've been saying 25.
Yes, some studies are showing it's more common in boys.
Okay.
28 is like kind of the end of solidifying that reason and rationality within the human. Our job as parents is never done. It doesn't mean that it has to be taxing or exhausting still, or, you're not doing their laundry. But our role as being a parent, we can take that and we can run with it, and it can mean whatever you want it to mean. Like for me, I know personally, because I do wish that I could, do over some of those early years, and I recognize that I'm like relishing the teenage years.
Yeah.
I love this age and phase, and not too many parents say that. They're like, oh my gosh, Emma's a teenager now. It must be really hard on you. And I'm like, I love it. I love every moment of it. And I'm like reliving all of it. And I'm so excited for her and like all my kids and like what's next. And I can't wait to like be their parent when they're in their 20s. I can't wait to be their parent when they're in their 30s. Like, it's so exciting to me now. Where like, sadly when they were little, I'm like, ugh, I can't wait till they grow up, like I can't wait for these days to be over. No, now I'm like, this is amazing. This is awesome. I want to keep parenting. And I think if we help other parents shift and have that mindset, how much healthier will we be as a world?
Yeah.
To have the support of our parents, as long as we need it, as long as they're willing to give it, or, whatever that looks like for that family. Some people are totally fine with mom and dad in California and the kids in Virginia. They love that. It's great. But for me, it's like, I want that interconnectedness and closeness with my kids.
Yeah.
I
do too. I have to say, I really, and I am loving the teen years. Like I came home from work yesterday from the office and sat at the table, and Tristan and his girlfriend were sitting there working on his homework. And I'm just like relishing in the moment, for one, and two, hearing all about the high school drama. And it's like, oh my gosh, I have an opportunity here, and be cool, because like, don't throw your mom advice at them right away or turn into life coach. Like, just listen. But it's always like, okay, do you want any input on that? Or like, it's just, I love hearing. I don't care what the story is. I love hearing it. I loved hearing about the pep rally or the drama or whatever it is, or late for class, or it's just silly stuff sometimes, but it's sweet. And I'm loving the high school teen years. Even with my middle son, he's middle school now. So, hearing what's going on in the halls there is cool too. And my daughter comes home and tells me all the stories. She's a little storyteller. And I didn't have the patience. I always have listened to my kids, but I don't know. It's just different. I think I was too testy, too much stress. And it's moving through and eliminating that has allowed for that space to be able to sit there and patiently listen and not interject and want to give advice all the time, which is hard for me. But
I think something to think about too. I just realized we each have a child in elementary, middle, and high school right now.
Oh, that's so
we're like
funny.
in the exact stage and phases of our kids.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But like, I was talking to this one mom, and she was like, I don't really like Dora the Explorer. I don't really like playing Barbies. I am an adult. Like, I don't really want to sit here and pretend to be Elmo. And I think that's okay. Like, we are adults. And sometimes in those early kid years, in those early elementary years, and we're trying to do that creative play with our kids, and they're coming home and they're telling us about the purple bubble gum that their friend was chewing for 15 minutes. We're like, oh, we are listening to them and interacting. But I think why the middle school and high school years start to become so fun is because, I can relate to this,
Right.
Like, this is really fun. I don't really relate to Dora the Explorer. Like, I'm really happy you like that show.
Yeah.
But it just becomes more, I don't know, relatable and realistic to just really genuinely get it when they're that age. So I think that if we kind of just acknowledge that, and again, be a little bit more, I don't know, like gentle with ourselves, like it's okay if you don't like playing Barbies with your child, or you don't want to push the little cars around for hours. We're not really supposed to like that as adults.
Right, our brain is a little too our brain's a little too developed at that point.
Exactly.
So that's a way slow down.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents feel guilty, like, I don't really like like to play with my kid. That's why we do play dates.
Yeah.
You know, that's why they go to school. That's why we talk about social development. You know, peers are really important for children. So that's one thing that I like to tell parents too, because, you know, that guilt complex comes in. Like, I can't really relate to my elementary child, you know?
Yeah.
That's okay. Love them. Give them that space to tell their stories. Support them. Really, truly know the child in front of you. Observe them. But
Right.
it's okay if you don't have the time to color for an hour.
Right.
Provide them with the tools to do so.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I got from, you know, that when my kids were little and feeling that guilt. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's important to know that it's okay. I know what I want to ask you. Kind of shifting gears just a little bit. Still talking about parenting though, which is funny. That's what we ended up talking about the most. But I love it because I think that it's things that people need to hear. Dads too need to be able to hear this. Moms and dads. But what do you say to people who feel like they need to be friends with their kids?
So I feel like we're kind of, like society has shaped us a little bit with that too, you know? Like you hear the phrase, I'm your parent, I'm not your friend a lot.
Right.
And then you have other parents who say, that's my best friend.
Yeah.
So, and I've met people kind of all over the place. I don't really think it's appropriate to say that you and your child are best friends because that puts a lot of pressure on your child.
Yeah, and then they don't feel like they can have other best friends.
Yeah, so I really like to kind of just keep it neutral. And I actually don't really say either phrase, you know? Like I don't say my kids are my friends, but I also don't say I'm your parent, not your friend, because there are times where I am their friend. There are times where they do come to me as a confidant, or maybe they want to say, you know, like, Mom, let's go to Target and get Starbucks. And I'm like, yeah, let's go do that.
Let's do that. I want to do that.
So I don't know. I feel like with anything when it comes to parenting, I like to kind of keep that playing ground neutral. So if your child wants to come to you as a friend, they can. If you need to take on that parenting role and eliminate friendship, you can, because labels haven't been placed on it. It's always going to be a parent-kid dynamic, but there are absolutely times where we're playing a board game together and rolling on the floor laughing where we feel more like friends than parents and children. So I, again, like to just kind of remove the pressure from that and allow our children to explore what that looks like for them. And if things become if they become confused or they don't know where that boundary is, again, it's the parent's responsibility to take on the initiative and explain to them what I just said. Like, look, there are times where we feel like friends. Where I don't really like it is when it's not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. And so that's like, you know, the teenage years come along and the parents want to be their friend and they might offer them the White Claw or something like that, because my kids have told me stories already. And that's kind of what I'm struggling with a little bit, are those parents who want to be cool in their parents' eye or in their kids' eyes. It's not our job to be cool. Like, we don't need to go out of our way to embarrass them, because that's not fair to them either. We don't need to go out of our way to be super stern or super strict or create like negative, toxic environments for them. But it's also not our job to be cool and their buddy and to like hang out with them in that kind of way, because we're never going to be their peer.
Right.
We're always going to be older than them.
Oh man, I'm glad this conversation is going this way, but I'm wondering where it's going to go. But I'm actually glad that you just said that about the White Claw, because I think this is an important conversation that needs to be had. I don't know that it's had enough. And that gets asked a lot. Do I do that? Do I not? I mean, I know where I stand with it, but I know some people really don't. And they think they're doing the right thing.
I mean, every family has their own culture, and every family has like their own subculture. So, I mean, that is not only our race and ethnicity and our religious beliefs. So culture is something, how we view morals and ethics, the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, all that stuff is wrapped up in culture. And your family is going to have its own culture. And one of those is going to be your ideologies on what is accepted as far as your child's behavior. And so when they creep into those teenage years, I mean, gosh, even Audrey in the middle school years is telling me stories, and I'm just like flabbergasted, like, are you serious? So we have those moments as parents that are really eye-opening, like, whoa, this is going on, or this is happening. So for me, what I suggest, just like for my personal standards and for other parents, is to really talk to your partner, even if it's a co-parent, or if you're completely flying solo, you talk to that inner chatter voice.
Yeah.
And you make a deal with what you're okay with. What are you okay with? And that's with anything in child development and children's behavior. And if they do something kind of outside of those bounds of like what you're okay with, and again, choose your battles. It doesn't have to be super strict or super stern. But if they do something that you're not okay with, that's when that conversation comes into place. And so now that, we have older kids, and even parents who have adult children, maybe they do something that they're not okay with, we have to guide them. One thing that I always talk about is the word discipline comes from the word disciple, which means student. It doesn't mean punishment or consequence. So when we talk about discipline, it means that we're teaching our kids. So if they bring a situation to us, like I was at a party and so was vaping, or I walked into the school the other day and somebody had a White Claw in the bathroom, because that actually happened. They stole it from their mom.
Or the weed pins in the bathrooms.
Yes.
That's what I hear a lot.
Yes.
The little weed pins, and they go in the bathroom and they crowd in the handicap stall.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It's totally happening. And like what we have to know is like it happened when we were teenagers, and in different ways.
Yeah.
And our kids are going to be exposed to things. We can't protect them from everything, but we can teach them. We can guide them to doing what the right thing for our family is. So for some families, it's culturally acceptable to offer a glass of red wine at dinner when the child is maybe 14 or 15. And that works totally fine for some families. I would still say be super mindful about that, because depending on what that child was exposed to, in their early years of childhood, that glass of wine could mean something very different to them than what it meant to mom or dad when they were offered it by grandma and grandpa. So I think having just true opportunity to observe your child and where they are mentally and emotionally will help prepare you for what they're ready for. Because even your own, if you have more than one kid, even, they're going to be different for each thing that they're ready for in life.
Totally.
But it's been really different, having these teens and hearing these harder things. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, I'm not ready for that yet. But you have to listen to your moral compass and what you're okay with. And then explain to them, like, why you feel that way. Don't just tell them and say, like, you can't do this because I said so. Explain to them why it's bad for their health, or explain to them why it's dangerous, because they're more likely to respect you.
Right. Versus just, yeah, I like that. Don't just tell them, no, you can't do this. You have to explain. And I do try. It's hard. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to explain why. But if you don't in the moment, go back and do it later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like there are times where I tell my youngest Tucker, like, you can't do that, because it's quick and I don't have the time to explain thoroughly. Like he was flicking rubber bands on the bus the other day and got in trouble. And we were on the way to football practice, and I was like, you can't do that. Don't ever do that again. But then later at bedtime, I was like, look, that bus driver is in charge of a lot of kids. And if one of those rogue rubber bands is snapped and hits her in the head and she veers the bus off of our mountain road, that's not safe. And so that kind of put it in perspective for him. But you can kind of translate that to any scenario. Just your kids deserve an explanation.
They do.
They absolutely do.
And I don't know about for you, but what I feel like our generation was more of a, I'm going to tell you no, do as I say, not as I do. And now it's like we're starting to get it. Oh, okay, we have to be the example. We have to show them. We have to lead them by doing first. And we have to also explain to them. Like I would ask why, and I wouldn't really get an explanation. And now, I mean, my middle son is king for why. And it's like I have to stop and really get an answer formulated in my head sometimes. I don't always have the words right then. And then I have to turn and really explain why. And I used to be annoyed by that, and now I see so much value in it. And I can see how much he's learning, and he's receptive. He's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And that's where you're really teaching them. That's where you're really molding their brains. Okay, I want to switch complete gears over to you and your self-discovery journey. Can you share a little bit about that, and how are you on a self-discovery journey? I think you are.
I think so.
Like you do that inner reflecting. Have you just always done that, or was there a period of time where you started doing that?
I don't know. I mean, probably every human would say this, but I feel different. I feel different than most human beings. Like, I feel like, there's like that meme or something online where it's all the ballerinas that are like lined up at the bar doing point, and then the last little girl's like hanging upside down.
Yeah.
And like, I told one of my best friends the other night, I went to Emma, my oldest, made the homecoming court.
Aww.
And this is homecoming week. So every night there's been something at the high school that I have to go to for homecoming. So it's like throwing me right back into those high school years. And most of the nights, it seems like all the other moms have gotten some sort of memo that I didn't get of like the dress code. And they're all wearing like the same exact thing. And then I show up in purple pants and like Vans, and everybody else is wearing, Hey Dudes, skinny jeans with the perfectly placed ripped, hole on the knee, and hoodies. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't get the memo again.
That's so funny.
So I think I've always felt a little different. And that was very hard for me growing up. It gave me great anxiety. I was painfully shy to the point where people thought I was a bitch, because I was like,
yeah,
I had a hard time talking to them. And then I felt really like I was really hard on myself, because I was like, you're weird and you don't know how to relate to people.
I said yeah, by the way, just now, because people do that. If you're shy, I'm not, because I think you were that growing up. It's why do we do that? If you're shy, you're a bitch. That's terrible.
I was really just scared to talk to you people.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I never thought that about you.
Oh, thank you.
I did not think that about you. I always have thought you were the sweetest thing ever.
Thank you.
Okay, continue.
So, I mean, what it really boiled down to is I was super shy. And because I was shy, I always had like my good friends, like my best friends, and they were like my dear support system. But because I was shy, I wasn't always the one at the pep rallies or like at all of the events, kind of like Emma is. And so what that caused was self-reflection from a pretty young age. So I would take very long walks in the woods, starting pretty young. My mom didn't even care. I mean, I was like 8, and I would be gone for hours just walking and thinking. So I've always been this huge thinker. And I feel like when I had kids, that kind of like, they did take that away from me a little bit. It's not their fault.
Right.
That's just natural. And so because that huge source of self-reflection was taken away from me during those years, like that's when I also I noticed I became very angry. So I know that it is a huge like resource for me, and it's like a huge healing technique that I've always done, I think, my entire life. Because I've always preferred quiet, and I've always preferred deep. I'm not really introverted, but I've preferred to have like time away from society and my kids and family. Like I need alone time. So I think I'm always on a path of self-discovery, because now that I know that humans are always changing and always evolving, I'm like, oh, I'm somebody else. I'm somebody new again.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for me now to consciously be aware that I need that. And I almost have to like carve it into my schedule to take that time away so I can self-reflect. But I think like you had mentioned, the past 9 months have been really revolutionary for you. I feel like the past year has also been really huge, been very revolutionary, where things are like, the momentum is picking up again.
Yeah.
And the momentum picking up means sometimes more alone time and more quiet, but also sometimes more connection with other humans that I'm meant to connect with, because I have self-reflected and I've weeded out a lot of what doesn't work for me anymore. And I used to be such a people pleaser, like even to strangers out in public, I'd be like, oh, I want to be really nice to them, but it was depleting me, and it was taking away from like what my loved ones deserved. So now I'm kind of like compartmentalizing. So that's new for me. I'm also just putting time and energy into different areas than I used to. So things are shifting again. So I think I'll always be on that path of self-discovery.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to learn, not just about myself, but the world and other people. And because there's so much to learn and I am learning more, it's going to change and shape me again, all over again. So I don't know. I feel like learning something new about myself and then handling things differently, and then my perspective changes.
Yeah, I feel the same way though. And it's funny though, because you said that about going into your kid's school, and then there you are. It's kind of triggering your high school years for you. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of going through that too right now, just going back into a high school. And I'm always the different mom because I have tattoos up and down my arm and I look quite a bit different.
And we were young when we had kids.
Yeah, very young.
So like for Emma and probably Tristan, they're like, wait, how old is your mom?
I know. Oh, I thought that was your sister. I'm like, well, thank you. But, you know.
And what are our kids thinking? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Tristan was like, I made his football team food this past week. And they all came out to help get the food to take it in. And one of the boys said hi, and Tristan goes, eh! And they said, Tristan told us we're not allowed to talk to you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get it. I really get it. I didn't care at all. Like, you're right. I'm going to stay away from you.
You just do you.
Yeah.
I'm here if you need me.
Have your identity over there. Like, find yourself.
Absolutely.
I'll be here to catch you or support you in whatever way you need. I'm not offended. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It was just kind of funny. But they do tend to think that I'm his sister. And that was the other thing too, though, in the identity thing. Having them so young, I felt judged a lot when I would walk into like a event for kids or something, and here we're teenagers walking in with this baby. And so I carried a lot of the weight of that too, and felt a lot of shame. I don't know if I felt shame. I just more so felt judged by people. And what you were saying about putting the baby on your chest, of course, now I'm like really going back into our conversation from a little bit ago, but and just saying, here's the baby, nurse, do the thing, mom. That happened to me too. And my arm was about to fall off holding this baby, and the nurse wasn't coming, and Richie had conked out on the couch because, I mean, it was a long time. It was a long process for us. So I understood why he fell asleep. But I had nobody to come in, and I'm holding this little baby, and I'm afraid I'm about to drop him. No support. Nobody taught me how to nurse. Nobody taught me anything. And that's when I think I was like, moms need more guidance. Moms need help. And I didn't know how that was going to look for me to contribute to the world. And now it's kind of showing up. But what I love is that I'm not really helping moms with young kids. I've been helping moms with teenagers and adult kids and helping them mend their relationships there. But I love what you're doing to kind of just wrap this back around and up. But I want you to tell maybe a little bit more about your business and how people can reach out to you. And I think that would be, I mean, do you feel good? Is there anything that you feel like you could add value to a little more for before we wrap this up completely? I
mean, I feel like this is such an expansive conversation, and there's so much that we could add. But it probably could never end, just because, there are so many different scenarios we can explore. And parenting is huge. It's a huge aspect of humanity and family life and interconnected relationships. So for that, and for anybody who wants more and wants, feels like this is just a little taste of like touching on what your heart is, I think it kind of does lead into what I'm doing, because this is my calling. And, I said that when I found out I was pregnant, I was applying to grad school, but I didn't tell you what I was applying for. I was applying to be a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
I know. It's so not me.
And see, now listen, that is going to be divine intervention.
Yes.
So that resentment was there. We understand that totally. But it wasn't what you were meant to do.
No.
So that was okay. That was good.
Yeah. So
it didn't feel good in the moment, but that was good. Mm-hmm. Okay, continue.
Yep, that resentment was there. But now with, tons of self-reflection, I realized all along I was meant to be a mom and I was meant to be a parent. And I truly and genuinely love being a caregiver, and I love children. And for the past 10 years, I've been a teacher and a child development specialist. And my favorite aspect of that was really working with the parents to see the child in front of them and really give them the most optimal environment to thrive in. Because I think all humans deserve that, and we can teach, even if a child or a family, this doesn't mean you have to create, an expensive environment. Love can happen outside in the grass. I mean, this is something that we just need to put a little bit more awareness onto. So what all of this has led me to do was to create Madrona Wellness, which is an opportunity for parents and children to come together and work alongside one another to really strengthen their bond, to learn who each other are. I also want to really focus on the birthing process, pregnancy, and the neonatal period. I'm really excited that I just announced and just created a holistic birthing class that I'm going to be offering in November for expectant parents. And that is to really, we're not just going to talk about, the fetal development. We're not just going to talk about the birth process. We're going to talk about what it means to raise a human and what it means to give birth in today's world and raise a child in today's world and really prepare the parents for this experience, because if they're better prepared when that child comes out, it won't be like a gray alien, well, maybe it still might be, but at least they'll know that that's a possibility and they won't feel guilty about it. But I also have special sessions that I actually called matrescence sessions. And so it's based on that idea of going through an identity crisis. And I want to help moms who are really struggling with feeling like they want to grasp onto their old identity and they're struggling with accepting their new identity, and kind of how to mash those two together so they're not resentful. I'm also working on just some women's empowerment groups in different circles. Some are going to be with kids, some are going to be without kids, but really shifting the focus back to being this, woman-centered identity that is powerful and strong, and we can own it. And somebody brought up to me not too long ago the phrase toxic femininity. We talk a lot about toxic masculinity, but that was the first time that I had ever heard that phrase. And it was really just a couple weeks ago. And it kind of made me go, that's interesting. But it's so true. It's still society places all of these expectations on what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a mom and how to dress and how to do all of the womanly things. And if you're born on that low end of the estrogen spectrum, you might want to have kids still. You might want to be a mom still. You might, do all of these womanly things, but you might want to do it in flannels and jeans, and you might want short hair, and that's okay. And I want to take away all of those expectations and all of those labels and just let people be whoever they want to be, but it be the best version of themselves. So they love parenting and they love who they are as a parent. And they can start changing some of those generational cycles. Yeah. Because our parents, generations before us, they weren't doing work like this, which is another, this is proof that humans are evolving.
Yeah.
So I'm just really excited to offer a space for women and children and families to come together and explore what it means to be their family.
I love it. And you are the best person to start this.
Thank you.
I'm so excited. Before you end, I want you to tell the story about the name and how you got the name.
Okay. Yeah. So my favorite book is called The Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk, who is typically a fictitious writer, but she focuses a lot of femininity and the female rising into power in the future. So kind of shifting back, the Native Americans used to really exalt the female as the center of their tribe, and she was very powerful. And that went away for a long time. And I feel like women are kind of finding that again. But the main character's name is Madrone, and she was named after a tree that is on the Pacific coast. And I was like, oh, I like that name. So I just looked up Madrone, but then I looked up the word Madrona just for sort of more of like a feminine sound with the A on it. And it turns out that Madrona is an old Celtic word for mother goddess and is Spanish for midwife. So I found that that was just like a perfect mashup of like some of my favorite things all in one. So,
I just love that. The name is meant to be when that's the story.
Yeah. So, and I really do. I mean, women absolutely 100% deserve to feel like a goddess no matter where they are in life. And we're not always going to feel like that in every second, but we are so powerful and so strong. And we also deserve support from one another. And, we're often that tree holding everybody up. But we have these roots that are deep and ancient. And we have access to so much power and so much stability. And we deserve to be able to tap into that. And that's what I want to help people do.
I love it. I love it so much. Do you have a website?
Absolutely. So it's madrona-wellness.com.
Awesome. And I'll link all of that down in the notes and the description and stuff. But Sarah, this conversation has been phenomenal. I am so grateful that you came and talked. And we didn't even know how this was going to go, but I think it was perfect. I really do. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening. I really, really hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. As always, be sure to like and subscribe and share this with a friend if you found value in it. Sending you so much love. Bye now.